Emily's mornings always started before sunrise. The soft light barely filtered through the thin curtains of her small, wooden house as she gently lifted her infant son Leo from his crib. His tiny fingers wrapped instinctively around hers, and she smiled, feeling a warmth that no hardship could extinguish. Life had been harsh since her husband's sudden death 2 years ago, leaving her alone to raise Leo in a quiet town tucked between rolling hills and dense forests. The community was small, and though kind at times, it offered little more than gossip and polite nods. Emily had learned early on that survival meant relying on herself, and she took pride in her resilience. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the tiny kitchen as she prepared a simple breakfast. Leo gurgled happily in his high chair, chewing on a soft piece of bread she'd toasted. The simplicity of the morning was comforting, yet Emily always felt the quiet pull of unease. The local news had warned of dry conditions and an unusually warm season, a dangerous combination that made forest fires more likely. She tried to dismiss it. After all, the fire warnings were common in this part of the state. But a small knot of worry lingered at the back of her mind, a nagging whisper that the forest she loved could also be a trap. After breakfast, Emily dressed Leo in a tiny blue jacket and bundled him securely. Today, she decided, they would take a walk in the forest that bordered the town. The walk was a ritual of sorts, a way to teach Leo about the world beyond their walls, to show him the magic of leaves dancing in the wine, the chatter of birds, and the small wonders hidden under rocks and fallen branches. Emily cherished these moments, fleeting as they were, knowing her presence and attention were the greatest gifts she could give him. She slung Leo into his stroller and pushed it along the narrow path leading into the woods, inhaling the crisp, earthy scent of pine and damp soil. The forest was alive with gentle rustles and whispers. Sunlight streaked through the tall trees, creating a mosaic of shadows on the ground. Emily hummed softly, pointing out the shapes of the clouds to Leo, even though he was too young to understand. The simplicity of it all, the wind, the birds, the quiet connection between mother and child, was a sanctuary from the financial struggles and social isolation that marked her daily life. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe that the world could always be this serene. Yet beneath the tranquility, nature harbored its own hidden perils. Emily noticed the dryness in the leaves, the brittle twigs underfoot. The news warnings resurfaced in her mind, a subtle reminder that peace was never guaranteed. But she pushed the thought away, unwilling to let fear steal these precious moments. They ventured deeper into the forest, Emily guiding Leo carefully along the uneven terrain, the baby's wide eyes drinking in the vastness of the world around him. The townspeople often remarked on Emily's independence. She worked tirelessly at the diner, took care of her home, and loved Leo fiercely. Yet, despite her strength, there was a vulnerability she could not hide, a sense of solitude that sometimes felt suffocating. She longed for support, for someone who understood the challenges of raising a child alone in such a remote place. Little did she know, the answer to that longing was closer than she imagined, hidden in the rugged, vast expanse of the state's wilderness. As the morning sun climbed higher, a thin wisp of smoke began to curl in the distance, unnoticed by Emily. It was faint, almost harmless, blending with the morning mist. But that tiny wisp would soon grow into something unstoppable, setting the stage for a chain of events that would test her courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond with her child. For now, Emily simply laughed as Leo kicked his tiny legs, blissfully unaware that their peaceful walk was about to become a fight for survival. Emily felt the warmth of the morning sun on her face as she pushed Leo along the winding forest path. Birds chirped cheerfully, and the gentle sway of the trees seemed to echo a lullaby only nature could compose. For a brief, fleeting moment, the world felt safe, her son gurgling happily in the stroller, her mind momentarily free of bills, chores, and loneliness. But the forest has a way of reminding even the most careful travelers that its beauty can hide danger. It started with a faint smell, almost imperceptible at first, a sharp, acrid scent that didn't belong in the sweet, earthy aroma of the woods. Emily paused, sniffing the air. "Probably just someone burning leaves near the edge of town," she muttered to herself, though unease coiled in her stomach. Leo shifted in the stroller, sensing his mother's tension. Emily brushed it off, urging herself forward. The path grew narrower, winding between older trees whose twisted roots clawed at the earth. She hummed to Leo, trying to keep the fear from her voice, yet the forest felt different somehow, charged with an energy she couldn't name. Then came the sound of faint crackling, almost distant at first. Emily froze, her heart picking up pace. Leaves on the ground began to stir in ways that weren't explained by the breeze. Smoke, thin and gray, curled lazily through the trees. At first, she convinced herself it was nothing. A campfire, a controlled burn, someone careless. But the smoke thickened quickly, and the sweet calm of the morning was replaced by a metallic, bitter tang that made her throat burn. Emily spun the stroller around, instinctively heading back toward the main road, but her pulse quickened as she realized the smoke was spreading faster than she expected. The path she had taken, once familiar and comforting, was now a maze of shadows and ominous whispers. The distant sun was obscured by a haze of gray, casting eerie shapes on the forest floor. Leo began to fuss, his small hands clutching at her shirt. Emily's breath came faster, each inhale filled with smoke that burned her lungs. Panic clawed at her chest. She ran. Or at least she tried. The uneven terrain of roots, rocks, and fallen branches slowed her down, each step a precarious negotiation with the earth. The fire, though not yet visible, announced itself in subtle signs. The sudden crack of a burning branch, the smell of heated sap, the way the air shimmered above patches of dry grass. Emily realized that the fire had begun miles deeper in the forest, yet the wind was pushing it toward her with terrifying speed. Fear sharpened her instincts. She grabbed Leo, holding him close to shield him from the smoke, and scanned the forest for a safe route. Trees towered overhead, their leafy canopies blocking the sun and amplifying the sense of being trapped. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a warning, every snapping twig a threat. The fire was invisible now, yet Emily could feel its presence pressing in, as if the forest itself had turned against her. Somewhere ahead, a faint figure appeared, riding through the haze. Emily squinted, heart pounding. It was a man, on horseback, moving with a confidence that contrasted sharply with her own frantic scramble. His silhouette was calm, deliberate, an island of control in the chaos of smoke and fear. Cole, the cowboy whose land stretched over half the state, had seen the fire from a distance and was already moving to intervene. Emily's relief was tempered by fear. Would he reach them in time? Could he navigate the forest as safely as she hoped? The fire was no longer just a distant threat. It was approaching with relentless force, ready to consume everything in its path. And for Emily, for Leo, the next moments would decide whether they survived or became just another tragic story lost to the flames. Through the haze of smoke and the distant roar of the fire, Emily squinted, trying to make sense of the figure approaching on horseback. At first, she thought it was a trick of her panicked mind, a shadow dancing among the swirling gray. But as the figure drew closer, the outline became clearer, a tall man, broad-shouldered, moving with the kind of effortless confidence that only comes from familiarity with the land. His hat was pulled low over his eyes, and his jacket, coated lightly with ash, hinted that he had been battling the encroaching flames for some time. Cole had seen the fire from his ranch miles away. The wind had shifted, pushing the smoke toward the edge of his property, and instinct told him someone could be trapped in the forest. He had ridden hard, his horse navigating fallen branches, scorched undergrowth, and the thickening smoke. The fire was unpredictable, but Cole knew the forest like the back of his hand. Every hidden creek, every narrow path, every clearing that could provide temporary refuge, he had memorized it all over years of managing his vast land. Emily's heart raced as she watched him approach, clutching Leo tightly. The fire was no longer distant. Its heat was palpable, prickling her skin and stinging her eyes. The smoke thickened, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The man did not hesitate, riding directly toward the danger, a living beacon of calm amid chaos. There was something almost unreal about him, like a guardian materialized out of the forest itself. When he finally reached her, he slid from his horse with a grace that suggested years of hard work and survival instinct. "Hold tight," he said, his voice low but steady, cutting through the crackle of distant flames. He extended a hand toward Emily, then glanced at Leo with a reassuring nod. Emily, trembling, handed her son to him instinctively, trusting him with the fragile bundle she had sworn to protect. The baby cooed, oblivious to the danger, but Emily's pulse thudded violently against her ribs. Cole scanned the surrounding trees, noting the quickest route back to safety. "The fire's moving fast," he said, "but I know a place we can take shelter." He didn't wait for a response. Emily followed him, leaning heavily on his guidance, trusting him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone in years. The path was treacherous, fallen branches snagged at her jacket. Uneven roots threatened to trip her, and thick smoke made every step a test of endurance, but Cole navigated it effortlessly. As they moved, Emily caught glimpses of the man's determination. His movements were deliberate, every step calculated, every glance toward the fire measuring its speed and direction. He spoke little, only enough to instruct and reassure, but the confidence in his voice anchored Emily in the chaos. For the first time since the smoke had begun to curl around them, she felt a flicker of hope. The forest around them was alive with danger. The air shimmered with heat. The wind carried sparks that landed on dry leaves, and the distant roar of the fire seemed to grow louder with every passing second. Emily's fear battled with her growing trust in Cole's abilities. She realized, with a mixture of awe and desperation, that their survival might depend entirely on him. Finally, Cole led them to a small clearing, shielded partially by a natural ridge. The smoke was less intense here, though the heat still pressed down like a living weight. He knelt briefly beside Leo, checking the baby's breathing, then looked at Emily. "You're safe for now," he said, though the urgency in his eyes suggested that the danger was far from over. In that moment, Emily saw something in the cowboy that went beyond his skill or bravery. He carried a quiet, unspoken strength, the kind that could anchor others when the world itself seemed to be falling apart. And as she held her son close, watching the fire dance dangerously in the distance, she realized that this man might be the difference between survival and tragedy. The heat hit Emily before she even realized the fire was close. One moment the forest had been thick with smoke, the next, flames licked hungrily at the underbrush, crackling and snapping as they consumed everything in their path. Emily tightened her grip on Leo, who fussed in alarm at the sudden intensity. The clearing Cole had brought them to offered only temporary safety. The fire was advancing fast, feeding on the dry leaves and deadwood like a living predator. Cole assessed the situation quickly, his eyes scanning the terrain as if he could see through the smoke. "We have to move now," he said, his voice calm but urgent. Emily nodded, swallowing hard, and clutched Leo closer. Her arms ached, but she had no choice. Behind them, the roar of the flames grew louder, and the heat pressed on their skin like a physical force. Every instinct screamed to run blindly, but Cole's steady presence anchored her. The path through the forest was treacherous. Fallen branches crunched underfoot, sharp twigs snagged their clothes, and uneven roots threatened to send them sprawling. Smoke choked the air, making each breath a struggle. Emily coughed violently, tears stinging her eyes, and wished she could make herself move faster. Beside her, Cole guided Leo carefully, holding the baby in one arm while leading Emily with the other. His horse followed behind, its hooves sure on the burning terrain, keeping pace with them through the chaos. Emily noticed how Cole navigated obstacles effortlessly, ducking under low-hanging branches, leaping over fallen logs, and scanning the ground for patches of dry brush that could ignite underfoot. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, and protective. She realized that his knowledge of the land wasn't just impressive, it was the only thing keeping them alive. The fire wasn't a distant threat anymore. It was a living wall, a rolling wave of heat and smoke that seemed intent on swallowing them whole. Panic clawed at Emily's chest, but she forced herself to follow, trusting Cole's instincts. The smoke stung her lungs, and every step felt like wading through invisible fire. Sparks danced in the wind, landing dangerously close to dry leaves. Leo squirmed against Cole's chest, sensing her tension. Emily whispered reassurances, though her own voice trembled. The forest, which had felt magical just hours before, was now an unrelenting maze of danger and uncertainty. Suddenly, a burning branch fell near them, igniting a small flare on the forest floor. Cole acted instantly, kicking the flames aside and ushering Emily and Leo through a narrow gap between trees. "Keep moving," he shouted over the roar. Emily stumbled but didn't stop. The adrenaline pumping through her veins kept her on her feet. The fire spread unpredictably, sometimes jumping several feet ahead, forcing them to zigzag through the dense undergrowth. Every second counted, and Emily knew that one wrong step could be catastrophic. Despite the terror, Emily caught glimpses of something else, Cole's unwavering focus and determination. He moved like he had done this 1,000 times before, a guardian navigating chaos with calm precision. In that moment, Emily realized she wasn't alone, and though the forest screamed danger, she felt a fragile sense of hope. They were in the clutches of nature's fury, but they were not helpless. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Cole spotted a narrow creek running through the trees, a potential path to safety. "This way," he called, leading them through the smoke toward the glimmer of water. Emily followed, her legs burning, her chest heaving, but every step was driven by the need to keep Leo safe. The roar of the fire behind them was deafening, yet she clung to Cole's presence, trusting that he would see them through this nightmare. As they reached the creek, Emily dared to glance back at the advancing flames. The forest she loved was being consumed, yet ahead lay a slim promise of survival. And for the first time since the fire began, she felt the barest flicker of hope that they might just make it out alive. The small creek offered a temporary reprieve, but Cole knew it wasn't enough. The fire was unpredictable, and though the water created a barrier, the flames could leap unexpectedly. He knelt briefly, setting Leo safely on a flat patch of damp earth. Emily's hands shook as she instinctively reached for her son, but Cole held her back gently. "We can't risk him or you stopping now," he said firmly. His eyes, calm yet intense, scanned the surrounding forest for a safe path forward. Emily's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to escape the smoke and heat immediately, yet she trusted Cole's judgment. She had no choice. The fire left them with few options. She glanced at her son, seeing his small, trusting eyes staring up at her, and swallowed the fear rising in her throat. Cole's experience radiated confidence, and for the first time since the fire began, Emily felt the tiniest thread of hope. Cole pointed toward a narrow path running parallel to the creek, partially shielded by dense trees. "It's risky," he admitted, "but it's our best shot. Stick close to me." He lifted Leo, cradling the baby against his chest, and began moving. Emily followed, her movements deliberate and cautious, her eyes scanning for fallen branches or sparks that could ignite at any moment. The smoke thickened, curling around them like a suffocating blanket, making it difficult to see beyond a few feet. As they progressed, the fire's roar grew louder, feeding the tension in Emily's chest. Sparks landed dangerously close, igniting small flames on dry leaves and grass. Cole reacted instantly, kicking embers aside, stamping out sudden flares, and guiding Emily through the maze of trees. Each step was calculated. There was no room for hesitation. Emily's fear battled with her determination to survive, her heart hammering in rhythm with the crackling of the fire. Suddenly, a burning branch crashed down near them, sending a shower of embers onto the path. Emily screamed, instinctively shielding Leo, but Cole acted with lightning speed. He kicked the embers, guiding Emily and Leo behind a thick cluster of trees that offered some protection. The fire continued to roar around them, a wall of heat and fury, but Cole's presence was a steadying force, a shield against the chaos. Emily couldn't help but notice the quiet strength in him, how he moved, how he breathed, how he measured every risk before taking action. It wasn't just skill. It was courage and experience fused into instinct. She realized that without him, they wouldn't stand a chance. Her fear was slowly being replaced by trust, fragile but growing stronger with each step. After several tense minutes, Cole spotted a slight rise in the terrain, partially sheltered from the advancing flames. "We can wait here," he said, setting Leo down gently on a patch of damp moss. Emily sank to her knees beside her son, taking deep, ragged breaths. Cole scanned the fire line, noting its direction and speed. "We'll need to move again soon, but this gives us a moment," he explained. For the first time since the fire began, Emily allowed herself a small, cautious relief. They were still in danger, but they had a plan, a path, and a protector who seemed to know the forest as if it were part of him. Emily realized that survival was no longer just about running. It was about trusting someone who understood the fire, the land, and the fragility of life in its midst. And as she held Leo close, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest, she silently vowed to follow Cole's lead. Because right now, he was the difference between life and death. The temporary safety on the mossy rise offered a brief moment to catch their breath, but the distant roar of the fire reminded Emily that there was no time to relax. The flames were unpredictable, leaping from one patch of dry brush to another, driven by gusts of wind that seemed almost purposeful in their destruction. Cole's eyes never wavered from the fire line, calculating its path, its speed, its next possible threat. He lifted Leo again, cradling him securely against his chest, and gestured for Emily to follow. Emily's legs burned from running, her lungs stung from smoke, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Every instinct screamed for her to stop, to protect her son at all costs. Yet she knew that hesitation could be fatal. Behind them, the fire hissed and crackled, chasing them like a living predator, devouring everything in its path. Each step forward was a delicate balance between fear and survival. Cole led them through a narrow gap between two fallen trees, a shortcut only someone familiar with the terrain could find. Sparks rained down from overhead branches, and the heat pressed against them with relentless force. Emily felt panic rising, but Cole's steady movements were a silent reassurance. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice low and commanding. Emily matched his pace, trusting his knowledge of the forest that she could not see through the thick smoke. Suddenly, a branch collapsed directly in front of them, sending embers scattering. Emily froze for a moment, fear threatening to paralyze her, but Cole reacted instantly. He kicked the burning debris aside, pulling Emily forward by the arm while shielding Leo with his body. Her heart pounded violently in her chest, and she realized with stark clarity how close they were to disaster. The forest that had once felt like a sanctuary had transformed into a maze of fire and smoke, testing every ounce of her courage. They reached a small ravine, partially protected by rocky outcrops and damp earth. Cole lowered them carefully, setting Leo down first, then guiding Emily to a patch of wet soil that was less likely to ignite. The smoke swirled around them, thick and suffocating, but for a brief moment, the fire could not reach them. Emily knelt beside Leo, feeling his tiny hands grasp at her fingers, grounding her in the midst of chaos. Her relief was fleeting, however, as she realized this was only temporary, a brief pause in a battle they could not yet win. Cole scanned the terrain, his jaw set with determination. "We need to move again, but I've spotted a safer path toward the creek below. It will be our best chance to put distance between us and the fire." He lifted Leo gently, cradling the baby as if he were made of glass, and extended a hand to Emily. She grasped it tightly, feeling an unexpected surge of trust in this man she had just met, whose calm authority contrasted sharply with her panic. The path to the creek was narrow and winding, with charred tree trunks and dense underbrush forcing them to weave carefully. Smoke choked their lungs, stung their eyes, and made every step a battle. Sparks fell like rain from above, and the fire roared behind them, relentless in its pursuit. Yet through it all, Cole moved with precision and certainty, guiding them like a lighthouse in the storm. Emily realized that this was more than survival. It was a test of her courage, her determination, and her ability to trust someone completely. At last, they reached the creek. The water offered a natural barrier between them and the advancing flames. Cole set Leo down, brushing ash from his tiny jacket, and Emily collapsed beside them, gasping for air. For the first time since the fire began, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel the relief of temporary safety. The danger was not gone, but they had survived another harrowing stretch, thanks to Cole's skill, bravery, and unwavering focus. As Emily held Leo close, watching the firelight dance on the distant treetops, she realized that this was only the beginning of their ordeal. But for now, in this narrow escape, she felt a fragile but undeniable hope. With Cole by their side, they just might make it through the worst of the fire alive. The creek offered a temporary shield from the advancing flames, but Cole knew that staying in the open was not enough. The fire's unpredictability meant that they needed a more secure refuge, a place where Emily and Leo could wait safely until the worst of the blaze passed. He scanned the forest quickly, his eyes sharp for any hint of shelter. Then he spotted it, a small, hidden cabin tucked into a rocky incline, partially shielded by thick trees and damp earth. It wasn't far, but reaching it meant navigating one last stretch of treacherous terrain. "Stay close," Cole instructed, lifting Leo once more and cradling him gently. Emily followed, clutching his free hand as they moved carefully through the underbrush. The smoke stung their eyes, and the heat pressed down like a living weight, but the promise of safety gave Emily the strength to keep moving. Sparks rained down from overhead branches, but Cole's careful navigation kept them clear of immediate danger. Each step was deliberate, measured, a dance of survival between danger and refuge. Finally, they reached the cabin. It was modest, built of fixed stone and heavy timber, with a small chimney and a door reinforced against the elements. Cole opened it quickly, ushering Emily and Leo inside. The interior was cool, damp, and surprisingly safe from the fire outside. Emily exhaled a long, shaky breath, her body trembling with relief. For the first time since the fire began, she allowed herself a moment to rest. Cole placed Leo gently in a small crib he found in the corner of the cabin. The baby's eyes blinked sleepily, oblivious to the chaos beyond the walls. Emily knelt beside him, brushing ash from his tiny jacket, feeling a surge of gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Cole only nodded, his expression calm but alert. He was scanning the smoke-filled horizon, noting the fire's progress and planning their next move if needed. For a moment, the two adults simply breathed, the tension in the air slightly eased. Emily looked around the cabin, noticing its rustic charm and the subtle signs that it had been used recently. There were tools neatly arranged, a small wood stove, and a stack of firewood, all of it suggesting that the cabin was meant for survival in the wilderness. It was a hidden gem, a sanctuary in the midst of devastation, and Emily realized how fortunate they were to have found it. As the minutes passed, the fire's roar outside grew more distant but no less threatening. Cole remained vigilant, occasionally checking the chimney and windows for sparks. Emily, meanwhile, took the time to catch her own breath and reflect. The cowboy who had appeared from the smoke and danger was no ordinary man. He was capable, fearless, and seemingly attuned to the forest in a way that felt almost supernatural. She realized that trusting him had been the only way they could have survived the initial escape. And now, in this fragile calm, she allowed herself to let that trust deepen. Cole finally turned toward her, his gaze meeting hers with quiet reassurance. "We're safe here for now," he said, "but we'll need to stay alert. Fires like this are unpredictable, and I want to make sure we're ready if it moves closer." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of partnership forming between them, a bond forged in the crucible of fear and survival. For the first time since the fire began, Emily allowed herself to relax just enough to breathe fully. She watched Leo drift off to sleep in the crib, his tiny chest rising and falling, and felt a spark of hope amidst the chaos. Outside, the forest blazed, but inside the cabin, there was a fragile sanctuary, a moment of reprieve where courage, skill, and trust had preserved life. And in that moment, Emily understood that survival was more than just escaping the flames. It was about the people who stood beside you when the world seemed determined to destroy everything you loved. The cabin offered Emily and Leo a temporary sanctuary, but Cole knew the reprieve would not last. Fires of this magnitude rarely stayed confined, and the wind shifted constantly, threatening to push the flames closer to their shelter. He paced the small cabin, his eyes scanning the smoke-streaked sky through the narrow windows. Every so often, he would step outside briefly, checking the terrain, noting how the fire crept over dry patches of forest, and returning with a grim but determined expression. Emily watched him, torn between awe and fear. She had already seen his courage, his skill, and his unwavering focus, but now she realized the danger was far from over. She clutched Leo, who had been dozing in her arms, feeling the heat and distant crackle of flames pressing against the safety of the cabin. The roar of the fire was a constant reminder that nature was alive, unpredictable, and merciless. Cole moved with purpose, gathering buckets of water from the creek nearby and dampening the ground around the cabin's perimeter. He reinforced the windows and door as best he could, using tools and fireproof cloths he had stashed in the cabin. His calm authority contrasted sharply with the chaos outside, and Emily felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. She knew that without him, they would have been at the mercy of the forest and survival would have been unlikely. Suddenly, a gust of wind carried sparks toward the cabin, igniting a small pile of dry leaves just outside. Emily gasped, frozen in panic, but Cole acted instantly. He grabbed a nearby bucket of water, dousing the flames before they could spread, then turned to her with a reassuring nod. "It's why I brought this cabin," he said quietly, "and why we have to stay vigilant. Fires like this fight back, but we're ready for it." Emily's admiration for him grew as she watched his skill in action. He moved with a rhythm and confidence that spoke of years spent living close to the land, understanding its moods and secrets. Every action was deliberate, each spark stomped out, each barrier reinforced, each assessment of the fire's path calculated with precision. She realized that his ownership of half the state was not just about wealth, it was about responsibility, knowledge, and a deep connection to the land that few could comprehend. As hours passed, the fire roared louder, its distant growl now a constant companion. Emily helped as best she could, passing buckets of water, wetting blankets, and keeping Leo calm. She began to understand that survival wasn't only about escaping danger, it was about teamwork, resourcefulness, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Cole's quiet mentorship taught her this, and she felt a budding respect and trust that went beyond mere gratitude. Through the smoke-streaked windows, Emily saw flames consuming trees farther down the slope, sparks leaping across the forest floor. The fire was relentless, a reminder of the forest's raw power, yet inside the cabin, they had carved out a small pocket of safety. Cole's efforts kept it intact, and his quiet confidence anchored Emily's own courage. She held Leo close, realizing that while she had survived on her own before, she had never faced anything like this. With Cole, survival felt possible, even against an unstoppable force. As night fell, the fire's glow illuminated the horizon in a haunting orange light. Cole remained vigilant, monitoring the blaze, adjusting their protective measures, and ensuring they were ready for anything. Emily watched him, understanding for the first time the depth of his connection to the land, the way he anticipated its threats, respected its power, and acted decisively to protect life within it. In that moment, she realized that their bond had grown stronger in the crucible of danger, and that the man who had saved them was not just a hero, he was their protector and perhaps something more. The fire fought back, yes, but inside the cabin, courage, trust, and determination held firm. Emily knew that their struggle was far from over, yet for the first time she believed that they could endure whatever came next. The fire had finally spent its fury. Smoke still lingered in the sky, casting a gray haze over the forest, and charred trees stood like solemn sentinels against the horizon. The air was thick with the scent of ash and scorched earth, a stark reminder of the destruction that had swept through the land. Yet amid the devastation, there was relief, a fragile, hard-won sense of survival. Emily emerged from the cabin with Leo cradled in her arms, blinking against the light of the early morning sun. For the first time in what felt like days, she could breathe without the oppressive weight of smoke in her lungs. Cole was already outside, surveying the damage with a quiet intensity. His horse grazed nearby, tired but unharmed, and his rugged features reflected the long hours he had spent battling the fire's unpredictable path. Emily approached cautiously, unsure how to process the flood of emotions rising within her: relief, gratitude, exhaustion, and a strange, tentative hope. She realized that without Cole, they might not have survived the blaze, and the weight of that truth pressed on her chest. "Looks like it's finally under control," Cole said, his voice calm, though the weariness in his eyes betrayed the long night of vigilance. He nodded toward the forest, where blackened trunks and smoldering embers testified to the fire's relentless march. "We lost a lot of trees, but the cabin held, and more importantly, you and Leo are safe." Emily let out a shaky laugh, a mix of relief and disbelief. "I still can't believe we made it," she admitted. The memory of running through smoke, dodging falling branches, and feeling the relentless heat pressed against her skin was still vivid, almost too overwhelming to recall. Cole's gaze softened as he looked at her, and for a moment, Emily saw a rare vulnerability in the man who had been her unwavering protector. "You both stayed strong," he said quietly. "Leo has you, and you—" His words trailed off, but the meaning was clear. Emily had faced unimaginable fear, and in doing so, she had proven not only her courage but her resilience. As they walked through the burned forest together, Emily's thoughts turned to her life before the fire, the small struggles of raising a child alone, the isolation, and the quiet ache of loss. Standing amid the aftermath, she realized how fragile life could be, yet also how precious each moment was. Cole had shown her that survival was about more than escaping danger. It was about connection, trust, and the people willing to stand by you when the world seemed intent on tearing everything apart. Emily found herself opening up to Cole in a way she hadn't anticipated. She told him about her fears, her late husband, and the challenges of raising Leo alone. Cole listened, patient and attentive, offering words of quiet reassurance rather than advice. In that space, amid the still smoking forest and the soft morning light, Emily felt a bond forming, an understanding forged in the crucible of danger and trust. The townspeople, hearing of Cole's heroism, arrived to assess the damage and offer help. Emily observed quietly, feeling a mixture of pride and humility. Cole had saved them, yes, but he had also demonstrated a deep responsibility to the land and the people who depended on it. Emily realized she had never fully understood the man behind the quiet, commanding presence. Now, she saw not just a hero, but someone capable of compassion, courage, and unwavering integrity. That night, as Emily tucked Leo into bed, she allowed herself to rest fully, releasing the tension that had gripped her for days. The fire had tested her in ways she could never have imagined, but it had also revealed her inner strength and the extraordinary man who had stood beside her in the face of unimaginable danger. In the aftermath, Emily understood that healing would take time, but survival had given her a gift, the knowledge that courage, trust, and love could endure even the fiercest fire. And as she drifted into a rare, peaceful sleep, she felt a quiet certainty that life, though fragile, could still hold hope, new beginnings, and perhaps even happiness she hadn't dared to imagine before. The forest was slowly healing, the blackened trunks giving way to small shoots of green that poked through the ash-strewn earth. Emily walked along a familiar path, Leo toddling at her side, holding her hand with a trust that made her heart swell. The fire had left scars, both on the land and on her memory, but it had also left something precious, a renewed sense of resilience and a connection she had never anticipated. Beside her rode Cole, his horse steady and sure, his presence as protective as it had been in the chaos of the fire. The bond between them had deepened over the weeks since the blaze. Emily found herself leaning on him in ways she hadn't imagined, sharing laughter, stories, and moments of quiet reflection. Cole, once a solitary figure known only for his wealth and rugged independence, had revealed a side that few people in town had seen: patient, caring, and fiercely protective of those he cared about. Emily realized that the man who had saved their lives in the forest had become an anchor for her own life. As they reached the edge of the creek where they had first paused during the fire, Emily looked at the flowing water and felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. Leo knelt by the creek, tossing small stones into the rippling water, and Emily laughed softly, the sound echoing in the quiet morning air. Cole dismounted, kneeling beside Leo to show him how to skip stones. Watching them together, Emily felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet hope for the future. The town had begun to recover from the fire as well. Neighbors who had once offered only polite nods now stopped to ask after Emily and Leo, expressing gratitude to Cole for his heroism. The fire had been devastating, but it had also brought people closer, creating a sense of community that Emily hadn't known she needed. She realized that life could be unpredictable and harsh, yet still full of moments of connection, trust, and love. Cole finally turned to her, brushing ash from his jacket, his eyes soft and steady. "You've been incredible," he said. "You protected Leo, you stayed strong, and you trusted me when it mattered most." Emily's heart quickened. She knew that what had started as gratitude and reliance had blossomed into something deeper, an emotional bond that neither the fire nor the isolation of her life could have forged alone. "I didn't have much choice," she replied, smiling. "But I'm glad you were there." Her words hung between them, carrying an unspoken truth. They had saved each other in more ways than one. Cole reached for her hand, squeezing it gently, and Emily felt a thrill of certainty she hadn't known in years. For the first time since her husband's death, she could imagine a life that wasn't just about survival, but about thriving. In the weeks that followed, Emily and Cole continued to build a life together. They worked side by side to restore parts of the forest, planting saplings and clearing debris, teaching Leo about resilience and the importance of the land. The cabin became a home, not just a shelter from disaster, but a place filled with laughter, warmth, and hope. Emily found herself growing stronger, more confident, and more open to the possibilities that life could offer. One quiet evening, Emily watched the sunset with Leo in her arms and Cole by her side. The fire-scarred forest glowed golden in the fading light, a testament to survival, growth, and renewal. Emily realized that the fire had changed them all, not just the land, but their hearts. They had endured danger, faced fear, and emerged stronger, bound together by trust, courage, and love. And in that moment, with the wind rustling gently through the recovering trees, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The forest had tested them, but it had also given them a gift, the chance to start anew, together as a family. Life was fragile, but it was also beautiful, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt that everything might just be possible.